Hi, I'm Pouyan Darian. I'm an immigration lawyer, and today I want to talk to you about the immigration interview. Specifically, what can I expect at the immigration interview? This is a topic I discuss all the time, and oftentimes it comes up during my initial consultation with prospective clients. Now, you've applied for your green card by yourself or with a lawyer, hopefully with a lawyer. Some time has passed, possibly a year has passed or longer depending on where you live, and now finally you've received your interview appointment notice. What can you expect? Now, you and your spouse have to attend this interview, and you're having these recurring nightmare scenario thoughts about, what happens when we are separated and interrogated and one of us just breaks down crying and we're just under so much pressure and you can't focus. The good news is that's not usually how it goes. Usually it's something like this. The officer reviews all the evidence you've submitted maybe a year ago when you filed your paperwork. They review this presumably a couple minutes before they call you in for your interview. They come out, grab you and your spouse, bring you into the interview appointment room. It's usually a really small room. There's one officer, it's audio recorded, and it doesn't always happen in this order, but these are generally the first few things that'll happen when you enter the room. First of all, you and your spouse are together at this point, and you likely won't be separated, especially during this first interview. Now, the officer will ask you each to raise your right hand and to swear or affirm that what you're going to say is the truth, and you're put under oath. So any statements you make should be truthful, because they can be used to deny your application if they're not. You'll be asked to submit documents. At this point, you submit your original documents and the additional evidence that you brought with you. More on this in the other video on what documents to bring to your green card interview. Then the officer will, not necessarily in this order, usually just flip through the documents, authenticate them, ask you for your medical exam, ask you for updated tax documents, and then just begin having a conversation with you, your spouse, or both of you simultaneously about your relationship. Possible questions can range from anything from what's the public transit situation near where you live, who cooked breakfast this morning, what day of the week do you put the garbage out? Questions just to try to establish that you and your spouse are sharing your lives together. And the questions can become much more serious or hostile, especially if you didn't bring evidence of your relationship. I see this happen all the time when people think they know what they're doing, do everything by themselves, and they go to the interview and the only evidence of their relationship are some photographs that they took. They heard that that's worked for other people in the past, so they brought that with them to the interview. And then they come to me months later because they haven't received a decision on their green card, and it turns out they're being scheduled for a second interview. Most of my clients, I would say more than 99% of my clients, have never seen a second interview. The second interview is usually much later than the first interview. So you finish your first interview, no decision is made, months pass, nothing, and eventually, could be up to a year later, there's a second interview where you guys are separated and asked much more hostile questions, where the officer is actively looking for differences in your responses to deny your application. That's called a fraud or Stokes interview, and that happens when the first interview is insufficient, where you guys have said drastically inconsistent things, or the officer just wasn't convinced with the evidence that you brought or the things that you said that you're in a good faith relationship. This second or Stokes interview that I'm referring to, where they separate the spouses and it's much more hostile, usually the same questions are asked to each spouse, looking for material differences in the responses. This is what people hear about and they think about when they think of the immigration interview. but it's usually a pretty relaxed situation. You know, the officer's sitting where I'm sitting, 5 feet away, you and your spouse are sitting in chairs, just having a conversation back and forth. Now with COVID, there's probably a plexiglass divider, and if English isn't your best language, you should notify them in advance, and the whole interview will be conducted in your best language, typically using a USCIS telephone interpreter, which, you know, depends on the language. They're not always the best, but the point is, it's a much more relaxed environment than many people anticipate. You know, one thing that I'm hesitant to say as general advice, but I will say, when most of my clients are prepared for these interviews and there are no major fraud issues or criminal issues and everyone's prepared, all the documents are ready to go and all they need to do is show up and tell the truth, I tell my clients that it's probably not necessary to spend money for a lawyer to come with you to the interview. This is going to change with the policies of the times, and, you know, as the risks for immigrants increase and decrease, this may change. So don't take that as advice. But my role at these interviews is typically very limited. When it's a straightforward case and the clients insist that I attend because they're just panicking, I'll go. But I typically just sit in the back of the room and take notes. And it's not a big room, but the officer will say, like, you sit there. And I don't really get involved. Things usually go pretty smoothly. Now, if the officer steps out of line and does something that is not permitted, I would get involved. And I would ask to escalate the situation to a supervisor. But that's really rare. Honestly, that's rare, but it does happen. The reason I wanted to make a video on this specific topic is so that you can visualize the outcome. As the immigration lawyer who prepares my clients for these cases, I prepared the entire immigration package, all the forms and initial evidence that we mail. I respond to all of the government's requests for evidence. I prep my clients for the interview, different contingencies which may arise, and we create a detailed list of documents to bring to the interview so that it's as simple as possible and everyone's super prepared. If you're interested in applying for a green card, just remember that this is what I do. My team and I are available to assist you, and all you have to do is call, text, book a consultation online, and let's get your green card.